everybody. This is Blue Mayze doing a primer on Rekordbox in conjunction with your CDJs. All right, and right now we have the Rekordbox window open, and pretty much what Rekordbox is, it is a DJing software that you can use to organize and even perform your own music. But a lot of people prefer to use Rekordbox just to sort and organize and label music and playlists and whatnot, and then export the files onto a USB drive and then play it on their CDJs, which is what I'll be teaching you how to do today. Let's cover the differences first between Rekordbox version 5 and Rekordbox version 6. Now, right now I have actually Rekordbox version 5 on my computer, and recently Rekordbox version 6 was released, and there are some subtle differences. Due to the release of Rekordbox 6, Rekordbox 5 is now free for all versions. But Rekordbox 6, there's different tiered versions. There's free version and a paid version, a slightly more expensive paid version that's on a monthly subscription basis. And with these paid versions, you get additional features such as syncing your tracks to the cloud, which isn't available on Rekordbox 5. So to determine which version of Rekordbox you need, you'll determine, sort of what sort of features and the amount of money that you'll want to spend. Before we import any tracks, let's take a look at our settings to make sure that that our tracks are going to be loaded the way that we want. So to load the settings, you click on this gear button right here at the top, show preferences. And let's start by taking a look at categories. So your categories are sort of the categories that are going to be shown to sort by and filter by on your CDJ. You can pick any of these categories, and the ones under the column active category are going to be the ones that will show up on your CDJ. So here I have artist, album, and track, which is grayed out because that's always going to be included. You can't change it. Key, playlist, history, search, etc., etc. And then you can remove or add these as you like. Like you can remove from the active categories like so, and then you can re-add it back like so by adding it back. And you can even sort it up and down also. And then with the sorting, instead of filtering like we saw with the category column, you can instead sort by certain categories. Like alphabet, you may want to list your tracks in alphabetical order. This one's on by default in the hardware since it's grayed out. You can sort by artist, album, beats per minute, rating, and key. And now for the rating, some people use rating to determine how much they like the track or not, but I've heard some people also use rating to sort by energy. So say you want a more high energy track, you'll rate it 5 stars, and if you want a low energy track, you might rate it 1 star. All right, and now let's go to the analysis part. So here is how the tracks will be analyzed inside of Rekordbox. I think the most important settings that you're going to want to pay attention to are in these top 2 boxes right here, the track analysis mode and the track analysis setting. So, usually for the BPM analysis, 70 BPM to 180 BPM ought to be sufficient. Maybe if you're playing some slow tracks, you can use a different setting, or if you're only going to have really fast tracks, you can use one of these settings at the bottom. But for me, 70 to 180 BPM is sufficient. And likewise for the track analysis setting, this will determine if Rekordbox will analyze your BPM grid or your key. Now you'll note here that I don't have the key checked. It's because I actually use an external software. For me, it's Mixed in Key 8, and I do the key analysis there. You might find that certain softwares externally will do better key or BPM analysis than Rekordbox might, so that's why you might want to check or uncheck this. And let's look at the device settings now for your CDJ. So there's a lot of settings here, but I think I'm just going to show you the most important ones, which is time mode. Now, remain means that on your CDJ, it'll show the amount of time remaining, versus elapse, which shows how much time has elapsed on the track. And usually I want to do remain because it's hard to keep track for each different individual song, how long each song is, and then, oh, you have this much left because you know this much has elapsed. Just do remain. It's much easier. Let's see, and then tempo range. Now the default here is plus or minus 10%, but you actually have all these other modes, plus or minus 6%, plus or minus 16%, and wide, which is 100% plus, and then all the way down to 0 on the negative side. So personally, I actually like to do 6% because, as we'll see later, it gets you the most speed granularity once we're on the CDJ. And then for master tempo, this'll depend. What master tempo does is it keeps the pitch locked no matter how fast or slow you make the song. I sometimes use it, I sometimes don't. A lot of people use it all the time. It just depends on what you want. One side effect of master tempo is if you really speed up or really slow down the song, it will sound distorted. So I tend to leave it off because I'll be picking songs that are close enough in BPM anyway to where the pitch won't be off and you won't get as much distortion. But you can also change that on the device. What Quantize does is it pretty much lets you lock your beat selection. Say you're trying to cue a certain beat or something or set a loop, it'll quantize it to the nearest beat. And usually you want that on because you might not select your loops or your cues precisely. Sometimes you might want to turn quantize off too, but you can also do that on the device, and it's just easier to leave that on by default so it'll snap to the beat grid correctly. Let's get to importing a song. So to import a song, you can do either file, import, and then you can import a track, and then you can just pick a file and then import it. Or if you have a whole folder to import, you can import a folder and just go through, you know, your entire drive and then just select the folder you want, for instance. Or you could actually even go to your file manager and then just select the files that you'd want to import and then even drag them into Rekordbox. So plenty of ways to import your files. Rekordbox makes it nice and convenient. And now let's go over the main view. So as you can see, we have these various columns here: artwork, track title, artist, BPM, album, time, etc., and etc. Now you can actually move these around, as you can see, by clicking on the column and then just dragging right and left and right and left. And you can even include or exclude certain columns. Say, oh, we want to get rid of this artwork, it's just taking up space. Bye-bye. You can even search inside of Rekordbox for a certain track. And then voila, you can click on it and load it. All right, so now that we have our track loaded, you know, we want to make sure that our beat is kind of playing correctly and whatnot. So here's the song we have here. It seems on beat, but as you can see, when it gets to the bass drop, so to speak, the beat grid is actually incorrect. That's one thing about beat matching algorithms. It's going to be slightly incorrect, particularly if you have tracks with strong offbeats or tracks that are very broken and syncopated. So let's go over how to fix that right quick. So let's go to our drop. And as you can see here, this is actually where the first beat is supposed to be, but the beat marker is actually shifted over a little bit. So what we're going to do is on this little area right here, we're going to select grid. And over here, we can actually just click this button right here, which is set the first beat of the bar to the current position, and voila, it's on the correct beat now. And then there's a ton of other features you can use here, such as setting the actual BPM value. You can shift the beat grid a little bit. You can expand and shrink the beat intervals. If the sometimes we'll actually run into an issue where the beats per minute is listed wrong. It might be doubled what it actually is or half what it actually is. There's also nice buttons to correct that in an instant. Let's go over the queuing and looping functions now. Now for queuing, you might want to use some cues because, say, you want to indicate, oh, I want to go to this part of the song. And there's 8 cues here, but the thing is, not all of the CDJs will be able to use all 8. Some have actually as few as 3 different cues, and the rest of the cues simply won't be read, they'll be discarded. So for cues A through C, you'll want to make sure to put your most important cues. So for instance, we might put A here, since that's the first drop, and then we might put another one right over here, because that's another drop. And then maybe we might even do, say right here for C, because that's a fade out. And those cues will be exported on your USB to use on the CDJ. And then now let's talk about memory cues. They're actually very similar to the regular cues, but they're not, you can't cue from them while you're playing the music. They're just sort of there more for reference and also for auto looping, which we'll get to in a moment. So in order to set a memory cue, let's say we want one at the beginning. We'll do this memory, we'll set the cue here by using the cue button. Then we will click memory. And as you can see here, the first cue is stored. And then you can set several of these actually. So we can set another one, say, when the beat falls out. And set one right here. Oh, sorry, don't forget to press the cue button and then press memory. Voila. All right, and now we can talk about setting up auto loop using the memory cues. So say you're running out of time on a song and you just want to auto loop a part while you're busy bringing in the next track. What you can do here is we will set up a small loop, say 32 beats. And then what we'll do here is we'll set the memory cue. And as you can see right here, there's this set active loop button. This memory cue now has this button so that when you play it on the CDJ, when it reaches that point, it'll automatically loop. But the important thing is you need to click on this orange loop button, and then it turns red, and that's how you know it's active. If you don't do it to where it turns red, then it will not activate the loop on the CDJ. All right, so now that we have our track set up properly, we have the loop set up, we have the cues set up all nice and proper. Let's export this track to our USB. So what we can do is export the track to F, which is our USB. And then, yeah, just make sure that when you're exporting tracks, don't pull it out, obviously, because the data might get corrupted and the track won't be fully exported. So, just to make accessing the track easier, you might want to also make a playlist. You can think of a playlist as sort of a crate of records, and you can use it for different gigs, or if you want to have certain tracks with a certain type of mood, you might make a playlist. So we'll just call this Make Music Day. Voila. And then to add to a playlist, we'll take our track and we'll add to playlist right here, Make Music Day. And then let's make sure to export this playlist also to our USB drive. Excellent. All right, now that we have our music and our settings exported to the USB drive, yep, we have our settings set up here as you can see. Let's make sure to eject our drive by clicking the little eject button next to the F drive on devices. All right, that's gone. Gonna unplug now. And now, let's focus on the CDJs. Let's talk about how to play and use our tracks that we set up in Rekordbox on the CDJ. All right, so we have our CDJ here, and pretty much what a CDJ is, it's sort of like a digital version of a record player. You can use it to play your tracks on the USB, and it provides a lot of extra functionality such as looping, reversing, etc., which we'll cover all of those here in a second. So first, let's plug in our USB stick. Now, this version is the XDJ 1000, and it only takes a USB stick. Different versions only take CDs, different versions take CDs, USBs, and SD cards. So just do your research to make sure you find the CDJ that supports the medium that you want to support. All right, so we plug this the USB in the CDJ. We click USB, and then as you can see, we have new settings data. Make sure to press the menu button, load, and as you can see, our CDJ loaded the data. You can even see that it's changed our default pitch setting to 6% instead of 10%. And on this second CDJ here, there's no USB. So usually what you would do is you would get a linking cable. So when you're trying to reference your CDJs, make sure that your linking cable is plugged in so that you can access the data from the other USB on the other CDJ. So let me just make sure that our linking cable is set up properly first. Yep, there we go. And as you can see on our other CDJ, even though the USB isn't plugged in, we can still access the same tracks that we can on our other one. And it's because we're using the link functionality. Anyway, let's go back to our main CDJ here. And let's talk about how we can sort of filter and sort through the various artists and tracks. So as you can see, our main sort of categories here that we set up on our computer, we can sort through it here. So we can sort by artist, album, track, key, etc. Now, when playing tracks, I like to use key a lot because it's important to make sure that when you're transitioning between songs, that you have songs in supported keys. And it'll automatically find the supported keys for you. Say you're playing in B major, you might do any of these songs because they're all in supported keys. And another quick thing to note about keys, there's different sort of key formats you can use. The sort of musical traditional key notation which I like to use, which is A, B, minor and major and whatnot. But a lot of DJs use what's called a Camelot circle, and instead of using the A minor and B minor, it's 6A or 6B, and then 7A, 7B, etc., and etc. And it can actually be simpler because finding tracks that work, it can be just as simple as moving from A to B or just moving up a number instead of having to do, all of this strange calculation. But the CDJ will usually do that for you anyway, so it's not that much of an issue in my eyes. So yeah, I guess let's find our track that we set up the cues for. Yep, here's our track. So we use this turning wheel to select our track, and to select the track, of course, press down. All right, so here we have our jog wheel actually, which we can use to sort of move forward and backwards on the track. Actually, let me turn off the music here. And then we have our play and pause button. Then we have like a cue button, which we can sort of use to cue. And then for our jog mode, this sort of affects how the CDJ will play and how the jog wheel behaves. So vinyl mode, which is usually the mode you'll want to use, it behaves like a record player when you move it forward. It moves forward like a record on a record player. When you move backward, it moves backwards like on a record player. But if you use the regular CDJ jog mode and you play, moving it forward just speeds it up a little bit, and moving it backward just slows it down. It actually will not reverse it. And then there's also this kind of peculiar feature about regular CDJ jog mode. that when you pause it, the audio will stutter like that. So usually you'll not want to use CDJ mode, in my opinion. All right, and then we have this vinyl speed adjust. What it does is it affects how quickly, when you play or stop the track, it gets up to full speed, sort of like how a record player doesn't start up immediately. This emulates that sort of functionality. So when it's all the way down here, it starts up immediately. But when it's turned all the way up here, it takes a while to start, and likewise, it takes a while to stop. All right, and now let's cover the tempo mode. As I was describing in Rekordbox, you have different tempo modes. So for 6%, when you shift this pitch fader all the way down, the track plays 6% faster. And then when you shift it all the way down, it goes 6% slower. And the center is always 0%. Then you have different modes, 10%. The track will play 10% slower when it's shifted all the way up, and 10% faster when it's shifted all the way down. And then there's this 16% mode, which is sort of a similar deal. And then it'll play 16% slower too. Now the wide mode is where it actually gets interesting. When wide mode is set all the way down, the track will completely stop, 100% down. Then as you bring it up, it'll slowly get faster, of course, until you get to the 0 marker here in the center, when it plays at normal speed. Then, as you shift up further, it can go to 100% faster, so double the speed. And for each of these settings, there's actually different granularities to which the speed can be applied. So for 6%, the granularity is 0.02%. So you can only increment the speed in increments of 0.2%. For 10%, that granularity is 0.5%. For 16%, the granularity is 0.1%. And then for wide mode, since it's a much wider range, the granularity is actually 0.5%. Now, these might seem like small amounts, but believe me, 0.2%, 0.02% rather, summed up over time, it can actually make a huge difference in your song. So unless you really need the huge speed boost or this huge speed reduction, use 6% like I'm suggesting. The button below the tempo button is the master tempo button. As you can hear right now, when you go down 6% or whatever percent, the speed goes down, the pitch goes down proportionally as the speed goes down. But if you want to keep the same pitch while moving the speed as well, it's this master tempo button. And so as you can see, it's very interesting because the pitch is the same, but the track is slower. No matter how much faster, or slower you go, the pitch is still the same, as long as master tempo is on. Now, also about this jog wheel, just another aside, some CDJ versions have an additional switch that looks like this vinyl speed adjust one that affects the sensitivity. This version doesn't, the XDJ 1000, and mine at home, which is the XDJ 1000 MK2, doesn't have that switch on here, but some versions do. For this CDJ, I believe you can actually edit it in hardware, but I don't like taking stuff apart. I don't know about it. And now for this side, we have this button here, which is like a reverse button. So it simply plays the track backwards. And once you let go, it plays it forward again. The track search functionality. Back, it goes back to the beginning if you hold back again. it goes back to the previous track. Now we're about to get to our automatic loop. So let's take a loop and see if that's activated. Voila. If you remember when we were on Rekordbox, we set up the point and the loop so that it would automatically activate when we got to this point. And now it did. And voila, it's going to loop indefinitely. And speaking of looping, let's cover our looping buttons. If you want to exit out of the loop for some reason, press exit. The track should keep going. Set your own manual loop. Voila, now we have a nice clean loop. And speaking of, let's talk about the quantize button. So as you can see, it automatically adjusts the beat grid quite nicely, but if for whatever reason you need to be a little bit off the beat grid, you can do it like that. You can see it's not very cleanly on the beat grid at all because we turned off the quantize button over here. Let's just turn quantize back on and make another loop. So we have a nice loop here. As you can see, it's 4 beats as indicated by the 4. So you can actually set it to different intervals such as 8 beats. Smaller, like half a beat. And then if you need to do certain loops that are outside of these range of beats, you can, for instance, do 16 beats, and then double it, and as you can see down here, it will say 32. That means it's looping for 32 beats. And likewise, you double it and it's 64. Keep having it. Likewise, you can even half it so that it's less than the half beat minimum we see right here. So yeah, definitely a lot of possibilities with the looping right here. Then let's go to our Perform tab right here. And this is how you jump between your various cues. As you can see, we can repeatedly press this, the beat cue, and it'll just automatically jump to the beat cue every time we press it. Or you can even jump back to the A cue like so. And different CDJ models, like I said, have different amounts. This CDJ has 3. Mine at home, the XCJ 1000 MK2, has 2 banks of 4, so you can use all 8 of the cues that we saw on Rekordbox. And yeah. And above these cues, we have the beat jump, so you can jump ahead a beat. Jump, 1 beat ahead or 1 beat behind. And likewise, 2 beats, 4 beats, and etc. And these buttons over here allow you to, edit your cue. So say we want to move QA over here. Voila. We press the record button. We press the A cue, and now the A cue is set to the beginning of the song. And these arrows right here actually represent our memory cues. So to go between different memory cues, you go left and right. We have one at the beginning here, we have one here, and then we have one for the loop. All right, and now let's cover this slip button down here, which allows us to do slip mode, which is also a very nice feature about this CDJ. Let's skip ahead here. So slip mode allows you to loop between various loop amounts. So say you hold this down, the track will actually keep progressing forward, and once you exit this loop, it'll jump to where it would be as if you never looped it at all. Voila, see, it just jumped ahead. And you can use it for nice repetitive effects like that. And you can even use it in conjunction with features like the reverse button over here. And it'll still keep going forward. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning into this primer on Rekordbox and CDJs. And also thank you very much to Dance Music Initiative for hosting this event. You can find me on SoundCloud at Blue Mayze. That's blue like the color, M-A-Y-Z-E. And the same on Instagram, Blue, M-A-Y-Z-E.